You know, it is the hardest, funnest, most terrible, exciting, and stressful job I've ever had. And the reason I describe it that way is like you could be at the top of the world one day and then you're like wallowing around in the muck the next day trying to figure it out. Having said that, it's like I wouldn't do anything different.
This is Jeff Birmingham, and welcome to the Extraordinary Us podcast, where I get to talk to friends and people that you may or may not have heard of, and we get to talk about important things. We talk about life. Let me remind you a couple tenets of the podcast. Number one, no matter our differences, and we're all different, although the guest that I have today, and we both have the same haircut, the best haircut. With glasses. But we're all different. Some of us have hair. Some of us just have the beautiful bald head. But no matter our differences, we're all a lot more alike. So therefore, number two, let's have more compassion for each other. We live in a world that is so competitive and constantly tearing each other down and comparing. Let's have compassion, more compassion, less comparison. And then lastly, I think that we make too many decisions based on a fear. Let's make decisions from a position of strength, from a position of faith. I think we'll all have better lives if we do that. I'm excited to have a good friend, and like I said, a really good haircut in the podcast with me today, Blake Modersitzki. Blake.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff. And yes, absolutely a great haircut. And for those of you out there that would like a haircut, Jeff and I can give you some pointers.
Yeah, we can help you out with that. No doubt about it.
For sure.
Let me tell you a little bit about Blake, and then we're going to get into it. You may or may not have heard of him. If you are in finance, if you're in business here in the state of Utah, you have definitely heard of him. I would call Blake kind of the godfather, is that okay, of venture capital here in Utah, or something like that?
Something like that.
When I started my firm and I started my fund and was thinking about it, gosh, was that almost 10 years? I guess I started angel investing significantly about 10 years ago. We started the fund about 7 or 8. Blake was the first call I made, or one of them. I remember sitting in the Peak offices right down here. Do you remember that? In the Riverwoods? Yeah. And Blake gave me some great advice. So he is the managing partner of Peloton Venture Partners. We'll talk a little bit about Peloton today. Most importantly, he's a girl dad. 3 girls.
3 girls, yeah, 3 daughters. And it's the best.
Yeah, how's that been?
You know, I grew up on a farm, so having 3 daughters, my wife used to coach me on, you don't solve their problems. They just want to talk to you.
You just listen.
Yeah, and now I have 3 grandsons, and so now I'm like trying to figure that side of the equation out.
Yeah, so you're a grandpa too now.
Yeah.
Do the farm animals, do they just want you to listen as well, or do they want you to solve their problems?
Well, as a farmer, we just like,
get stuff done.
Get them done. My partners joke with me that I need to stop saying, hey, we're just moving pipe. We're just moving pipe. Don't leave the field until the work's done. And they all just kind of look at me like, could you go home?
Yeah. And that was in Idaho, right?
Yeah.
Where in Idaho?
Little town called Bancroft up in southeastern Idaho, near Lava Hot Springs, Pocatello area. So
nice. Yeah. I feel like I've heard of it, but I've never been there. Do you have family there still, or do you go back, or is that like kind of gone now, or is the farm still there?
I was just up there this weekend. So my parents still live up there. My sister and brother-in-law still live up there. So yeah, the farm is alive and well. And my brother-in-law now runs it. My mom and dad are retired, but it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. Do you lay pipe? When's the last time you laid pipe, Blake? Let me see your hands. Look at those soft, supple hands.
It has been a long time. For those of you who don't know what moving pipe is, they're about 40 feet long and about 4 inches around and filled with water and mud, and you pick them up and haul them across and hook them back up, and water squirts you in the face. You're doing it early in the morning. Yeah, it's a treat.
Yeah. Sounds fun. But that's sometimes how startups are. Like you're just hauling crap around, getting squirt, surprises all here and there.
For sure.
So yeah, Blake now is a very well-known venture capitalist here in the state. We've partnered on several deals together just to get that out of the way. And we've done, Weave and MX and Divvy and several others that people have heard of.
Yeah. I think over a dozen, I would suspect.
Yeah. So it's been a fun ride, but I'm really excited to have Blake in here. And I wanted to, so let's start with farming. I didn't plan to start here, but are there things that you take from the farm? Because probably farm to venture capitalist is probably pretty close to as far away as you can kind of get, I would assume. But do you bring some of those what principles did you learn kind of farming, growing up on a farm that you now bring into your career as a venture capitalist?
Well, yeah, if you think about farmers, first of all, they're entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'll give a quick little...
They're risk takers.
Oh, total risk takers. I'll give a little story because I think it relates to a startup. Everything could be working perfectly well, and then there's an event that happens, and now all of a sudden you got to figure life out. On a farm, I remember I'm cutting hay. Our crops are like over 100 bushels to the acre. Everything looks great. And I look up and I see this dark cloud coming down the mountain or down the valley. And I'm like, oh, crap. August, it's 90 degrees outside. The clouds open up. Hail hits the ground. Oh. It wiped us out completely.
Really?
And oh, by the way, it just came through they come through in these
right down the valley or
micro bursts.
Yeah.
My dad was in town, no idea. I got to go call him on the phone. I said, Dad, we just got wiped out.
Wow.
That's one of those things where, like with a startup, I think as an entrepreneur, you just got to kind of look at it and go, you know what? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and march forward because there's not a choice.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have a choice to quit and go get a job. We had to figure it out.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely the case often in startups. What's it like being a venture capitalist? I think there's this idea that being a venture capitalist is super sexy. I'll say again, going back to our haircuts.
Yep.
But there's the kind of this obviously this glamour and allure to being an entrepreneur, to being a venture capitalist. Obviously, I have a lot of experience in both those arenas. But I want to ask you, what tell me about tell our listeners about what being a venture capitalist is really like.
It is the hardest, funnest, most terrible, exciting, and stressful job I've ever had. And the reason I describe it that way is you can be at the top of the world one day, and then you're wallowing around in the muck the next day trying to figure it out. Having said that, it's I wouldn't do anything different. I was given this opportunity back in '96 to be a venture capitalist, and it's just been the most exciting ride. But you're spot on. We have this running joke. Everybody wants to be a venture capitalist, but I don't think they fully understand what that means. It's not like we wake up every morning and money falls out of the sky.
It doesn't just rain dollars at the Modersitzki household. Yeah, no. And the other thing I would say is. Gosh, the rides, especially in earlier stage, which you kind of span the gamut. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Peloton strategy. But man, when you early stage invest, like I've done a lot of, and you have as well, that's a long ride. People don't understand that. They see the podium buildings or the MX, Divi, the whatever buildings. You understand those companies started 7 to 10 years ago, most of them. That's a long ride to get there. You're signing up. It's almost like a marriage, right? You're signing, when you invest in an entrepreneur, you are partnering for the long term.
Oh, absolutely. In 2009, we put $800,000 into this little company called Cloudflare.
Yeah.
It was 3 founders out of Harvard. And
Not so small anymore.
Not so small anymore. And, our original thesis was firewall in the cloud. Cloud was just becoming reality. We thought we'd sell this thing to Symantec for a couple $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can go out today and, that company has a $30+ billion market cap, but it was a decade journey with that business to get it there. And so many twists and turns along the way. But yeah.
What year did they go public?
They went public in 2019.
And you invested in 2008. So 11 years to just even going public. And then, by the way, before it starts, quote unquote, raining money or you make money, you're locked up now for a period of time, just so people understand. When you're kind of an insider, you're even restricted even further past that. So you have 11 years plus whatever time based on the deal. Yeah. So these are long-term deals.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at a minimum, you're locked up for 6 months. But then on top of that, we owned 20% of that company. So, if the trading volume, they're trading 1 million shares a day and we're holding 50+ million shares, it's not like you can dump those all on the public market at the same time. No, you just gotta figure this. So you're in it another year plus, if not 2 years after the lockup comes off. Yeah. Just to distribute it.
Yeah. So you said that there are ups and downs, you never know what's going to happen. I totally agree, which makes it fun, but also makes it challenging. But you said you wouldn't do anything else. So what's the best part? What's your favorite part or some of your favorite parts of being a venture capitalist?
I'd say relationships.
Yeah. You're good at those, by the way, Blake. Real quick so relationships. Teach us, how do you? I'm saying that sincerely. I think that venture is kind of a team sport, isn't it? I mean, this is something that I learned that I didn't appreciate when I launched a venture fund 7 or 8 years ago. I didn't understand kind of the team aspect of this. You want other venture capitalists to be on the cap table with you. You want other people to be rowing. You can never have enough fighters in your corner when you're a startup. So you want other fighters, other rowers, other money people kind of in your corner, right? So it's a little bit of a team sport. So relationships are critical. And Blake, I think you're great at those. What's your key to success? I ask the hard questions.
Yeah, here, what I'd say is, so I grew up loving sports, and I was always an average athlete. And I knew that I needed in football, I needed a center, a guard, a tight end. Like, I needed those guys to be good. And also I needed them to block for me. Yeah. I needed my point guard to pass me the ball.
So you could shoot it.
So I could shoot it. And I wasn't and then I need somebody to rebound it because I'd usually miss. And so like at an early age, I enjoyed people. So I roll forward to today, and early in my career, I learned some extremely valuable lessons that, friends like to work with friends. And people can understand if you're being friends to be friends, or if you have an ulterior motive. And this was kind of trumped by there's this great book out there. It's called The Go-Giver, and it's like 100 pages. And I'm not a big business book guy, but I started reading it, and what came out of it was this guy who was the go-giver. All he was interested in is giving into the ecosystem of success and friendship with expecting nothing in return. And it's amazing how much comes around. People know when you're being their friends and you're not genuine. So I always think about,
how can you help someone else? How can you serve? That's really what networking's about, I think, right? Like when you speak of networking in a business sense, you're thinking of whatever, a networking lunch, an event, a conference. But really what I've found, and I'm not the best at this, but I've tried to get better. It's really about serving or creating value for the other person. Wouldn't you say that's what the key to network?
100%. My mom used to say, you can catch more bears with honey than you can with vinegar. Yeah. And I used to think, who the hell wants to catch bears? Let's start there.
You were on a farm.
I was on a farm, but I understand it, think about if you're spewing vinegar at somebody, they're going to come back hard at you. Yeah. You know what? If you're figuring out something, and this is the honey component of it, you can usually navigate through some pretty difficult situations if you're just trying to be gracious in all of it. And so the best part about being a VC is I've made some lifelong friends that I never would have. Jeff, you're a great example. You and I met through this, and the evolution of where our relationship is today is very different than the day one we started. So.
Yeah, no, that is. I think that's the richness of almost everything in life. Really, is the relationships. It's such a balance, this result versus relationships. And when you're a Type A personality like I am, and I think you are too, Blake, sometimes it's hard. You got to keep those in balance. You always want the result. It's hard not to go for the result. But sometimes that hurts relationships. And really, in the end, the result you really want are these relationships. And I totally agree with you. And I mean it sincerely. I think that, you have a fantastic reputation in the state and outside of the state as just someone who's beloved, by entrepreneurs and people that you do business with. So I think you do a great job at that.
Well, you're very gracious. So thank you. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh man, what am I doing?
Doesn't everyone? No matter what you're doing, I think, no matter what success you've had, I talk to every sort of person on this podcast. All of us have mornings where we wake up like, what in the world is going on? And am I doing the right thing? And I certainly have felt that before. I felt that running for governor. But anyways, what's the worst part? What's the hard, so relationships, obviously it can be very lucrative if you do it right and if you have a long-term perspective. What's the worst part?
Just the flip side of that is, like, we make decisions. And oh, by the way, failure is a big part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've had to shut companies down. And, you kind of look at it, okay, look, it just didn't work and we're all going to be fine. But what sits behind those entrepreneurs, those employees, are families.
Yeah.
And I think about that. I had to shut a company down one time, lay off 200 employees December 1st. No money for severances.
Yeah.
We paid out accrued vacation just before the holidays.
Yeah.
And I was sick to my stomach because I knew exactly, like, it's less about the person sitting across the table from me talking to, and it's that spouse, those children.
Yeah.
That's the worst part about this business.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I mean, the way that I'm speaking generally, the way that most venture capitalists are successful and make money is they have these outsized returns like a Cloudflare. I'll just use that as an example. Or one of the first investments my fund made here in Utah, Podium. Some people may know that, where you invest really early. Podium was 2 guys. How many people were at Cloudflare when you invested?
3.
Yeah. And they just hit it out of the park, right? Like home run. But you offset those with a lot of losses or a lot of base hits or singles or companies that struggle to even return capital. And so that is hard. There's you hear of all these big, exciting companies. For every one of those, there's a handful of others that aren't as big as exciting, don't make it, but they're still run by great people that you develop relationships with.
Absolutely. I mean, one of our failures, a local company here in Utah, CEO, close friend. And I remember sitting with him when we were going to make the investment. And I said, look, you and I are going to be fine, but your wife and my wife are very good friends. If this doesn't work, we can't let that affect them. And like, it was an interesting thing. We both agreed. When it didn't work, we both kind of looked at each other and said, all right, you know what? What we're going to focus on here is our wives need to stay friends. And by the way, they're still good friends to today. But I always appreciated that because had nothing to do with the entrepreneur. When companies fail, it's usually,
wrong timing, wrong market.
Yeah. Market adoption, product market fit.
Yeah.
My partner, Jim Dreyfus, invested in something in like the early 90s, which was actually Apple iTunes before Apple iTunes. Huge failure.
Yeah.
Look at what happened with Apple iTunes.
It was just a little early.
Yeah, it was totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, timing is so much. So I didn't really plan to do this, but I hope this is interesting. A lot of the feedback I've been getting on the podcast is we love the variety of guests. You have experts from all these different fields. So I want to talk a little bit more about venture. So a venture capitalist, by the way, goes out and raises money. We're not going to talk a lot about that because there are some rules around that and et cetera. But to have a fund, you've got to get money, right? Usually the venture capitalists themselves, like myself and Blake, you invest in your own funds, but you really go raise money. So that's a big part of venture that maybe you don't understand. And you raise from high net worth individuals, you raise from large institutions or pension funds, et cetera. Is there anything you want to say about this, Blake?
Yeah, it's
because how much time do you spend fundraising? Maybe that's a better, like 100% of your venture time. Maybe this would be an instructive question. How much of that is spent on fundraising?
So during the fundraise, the cycle, 100% of my time.
Yep.
Off cycle, about 30% of my time.
Okay.
And it's relationship building, it's returns, it's what's different about you compared to every other venture firm out there. And sometimes they're checking boxes. Like the LPs, they invest, coming back to relationships, if everybody looks the same, they're going to invest because you fostered and developed a relationship. And it's hard and rewarding all at the same time.
Yeah. And so blended, maybe that's 50% of your time fundraising. I'm saying overall.
Oh, yeah.
Then you got to go find the deals, which is the key, right? You want to try to get into the best, hottest deals. And that takes an inordinate amount of time, especially by your team, to find the best deals. What do you look for when you're looking for? I often, of course, as an investor myself, I often have people say, what's important? How do I get funded? What are you looking for? What would you say to the entrepreneur, Blake, that says, what is Peloton looking for? Maybe not specifically, but give us a high level. What's Peloton looking for in the companies and the entrepreneurs that you back?
It's really three things that we boil it down to, because we have so much imperfect information because we invest at such an early stage.
Yeah.
Start off with how big is the market? So as an entrepreneur, if it's like a sub-billion-dollar market, that's probably not going to get a VC excited because you have failures that you have to offset.
Yep.
Second one is how disruptive. We invest in this company called Riverbed Technologies. And the first meeting I had with the CEO, he said, we speed data up faster than the speed of light. Now think about that for just a minute. Physics will tell you that's impossible. But making that kind of statement, I was like, all right, I'm super intrigued.
Yeah.
Because Cisco already does data movement.
Yeah.
But that's where he started. And then I'd say the third thing is, can this team execute against the opportunity?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you need to have a full management team. In fact, like the Podium guys or the Cloudflare, there's a couple of people. So you're going to have to help them build out a management team. So those are really the three things that we look at. And then ancillarily, that's even a word. Jeez.
It is. It is on the farm.
Yeah.
That's a word.
my daughter and kids will say to me, Dad, when we go to Idaho, your Idaho drawl really kicks in. So I'm just going to put a pin and say, that's my Idaho drawl that just kicked in.
I like that.
And it's like, like how can you add to their story? How can you help them build that and build these, great big companies? So.
Yeah. So then you're looking for the best deals, and then maybe not last, but and then you're nurturing and working with these deals. Yeah. You're sitting on boards for sometimes years or decade plus, a long time. You're nurturing, you're building, you're growing, and then hopefully at some point or time, whether it's the company goes public or sells, you're exiting and then returning cash back to your investors.
Yeah.
That's kind of the life cycle of a VC. Boards are really critical. I know, one time in my life, 3 or 4 years ago, I was on 20 plus boards, Blake. It was my own fault. It was ridiculous and way too much. You've sat on many, many boards, probably even more than me. What in your experience makes a good board member? Or what have you learned from serving on these boards? Yeah. Some of the most important things.
I'd say the most important thing is you work for the CEO and for the company. And early on in my career, I had, he's like one of the godfathers of VC. He said, don't be a pigeon board member. And I'm like, what is a pigeon board member? Fly in, shit all over the place, and fly back out. By the way, I don't know if I can swear on the podcast.
You just did. You and Susan Peterson, I think, are the only two people. That's great.
Well, I listened to Susan, and she said a couple of words. So I'm like, all right,
you can do it.
I'm protected. Yeah. I'm under the Susan Peterson cone of I want to be like her.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, you need to be. The board meetings are just an event. What are you doing between board meetings that's helpful? And we actually at Peloton, we limit each partner can sit on a maximum of 8 boards.
That's smart. Yep.
And,
that's great.
And sometimes we just go, that's even too many.
It is. Yeah, that's a lot. I think that's really critical. One of the ways that when I know that I had been doing a good job on a board was when the CEO or the founder was quick to call me with bad news or just as quick as good news. It's not really, once you take investment, by the way, you're sitting on the same side of the table.
Yeah.
Maybe before, that's a little bit of negotiation. There's a little bit of jockeying, which firm do you want to take money from? But then once you agree you really go on the same side of the table. So the point is, don't be afraid to share bad news. And when I had entrepreneurs and founders that were able and willing to quickly share bad news with me, I felt really good about that. You know what I mean?
100%. When they treated us like partners instead of adversaries, the world changes. And It's interesting. I mean, I watched my wife fill out Christmas cards, and she's still sending Christmas cards to companies I backed in the 90s because she got to be friends with their wives at annual meetings, and it's great.
Blake's wife is amazing, by the way. Just a quick shout out and sidebar. Sandy, she's unbelievable. If you know Blake, you probably know Sandy.
She's an unbelievable Instagram follow, by the way.
She is.
She's super entertaining.
I can't imagine though Sandy really on the farm. Blake, is she's not really a farm girl, is she?
No,
okay.
She's not.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Have you guys heard of Under Your Bed? I bet you have by now. If you're listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast, I bet you've searched for it maybe and haven't been able to find it.
It's true.
Isn't that how life is sometimes? You just can't find what you're searching for. Constantly searching.
Well, now you can.
Now we've been found. Under Our Bed is finally out. It's really there, people. So type it in right now. Search it up.
You're going to love it.
Look for it live, subscribe, and tell your friends. Can't wait to have you there with Jeff and
Sal,
providing the comedy relief. Good night, Sal.
Good night, Jeff.
So tell us a little bit more about Peloton. Obviously, it has a long history, kind of way back in the day, spun out a novelle. I don't really want to go through that whole history, but whatever you'd like to say, Blake. But what about what's happening now? You recently partnered or took over, I'm just going to say, a crypto blockchain fund from Jonathan Johnson here locally at Overstock. Medici Ventures. Yep. And you're doing some early stage stuff with some of the Josh and Ryan and some of the well-known up-and-coming founders. Todd, I don't want to leave anyone out. Jeff Curl's running that kind of for you. What is your strategy? It is hard to do really early, middle, just enlighten us on kind of what you're seeing in the markets and your strategy at Peloton right now.
Yeah. So just real quick, Novell Ventures, which I ran from 96 to 2002.
Which was kind of internal, right? To Novell.
It was you were 100% internal, all balance sheet money. My former partner, Jim Dreyfus, who retired several years ago with Utah Ventures, brought those things together in 2002 to create what is now Peloton. So there's the origin.
Got it.
Roll forward to today, and Jeff Curl had this great idea of partnering with Ryan Smith, Josh James, Todd Peterson to create, we call it Precedent, and it's focused on seed stage investing in Utah, and it's fabulous. Those guys are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What makes a great entrepreneur is a tad bit of craziness, and love them to death.
And then when you get them all together, it's, it's a lot of craziness.
Oh, for sure. They're fantastic. And then Jonathan Johnson with Overstock. Interesting enough, side note, I actually shared an office with Jonathan's wife back in the WordPerfect days in the early 90s.
I didn't know that.
Jonathan was in law school. I was going to BYU, getting an economics degree. So known him for a long time. And they had a corporate venture fund, and they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And through a series of conversations, Jonathan's like, look, we'd like to spin this thing out. Have you guys manage it for us? We want to be the LP and partner with you guys. It's this really interesting. And we hired a guy named Matt Mossman. Matt was the senior vice president of corporate development at Oracle. Mm-hmm. So like an unbelievable investor. So he runs that for us. And it's all blockchain and crypto.
Yeah, which is really exciting right now, right? And like beyond the Wild West. I was going to say it's like the Wild West. It's mind-blowing just it's like the Wild West times 10 or whatever with a lot of zeros added to it. What do you think about blockchain and crypto right now? It's impossible to keep up on. It's ever changing. What are your thoughts as a firm? That's not necessarily Peloton's expertise. And so what are your thoughts going into that space? And
well, when I think about blockchain, it's like networking software on steroids. I mean, it's super interesting. Crypto, all I can say with crypto is guys like you and Scott Paul that are a lot smarter than us, we're going to leverage that. I mean, I listen to Scott's podcast and I go, yeah, we have a lot to learn. But having said that, it's coming. Like, it's here. Crypto is going to be part of what we are. And so I think you have to figure out what's going on there. Super interesting on so many levels. So we have that going for us. And then two of my partners, Chad Packard and Ben Lambert, they came to me back in, I think, 17 or 18 and said, we're giving away too much at these pre-IPO rounds.
Mhm.
And so we started doing a pretty aggressive co-invest program where we'd put a lot of money in. We kind of double down or triple down or quadruple down on our winners. And so when you kind of look at the strategy, it goes from this super early stage all the way through to exit. And we have the capability to kind of do that, which is very different than back in 2002, where like it was almost like maybe 2 or 3 checks into a company and then we were tapped out. Couldn't do it anymore.
This might be a hard question, but I want to ask, does that worry you, Blake? Like, is that hard? Because it is hard to manage that full, very early stage, kind of seed stage checks all the way to pre-IPO deals. That spans the gamut, by the way. You go seed, A, B, C, D, E, whatever, pre-IPO, however many rounds there are. You know, those are different skill sets. You're now into crypto, et cetera. Does that keep you up at night? Is that hard? Do you feel like you can span the gamut? What other firms are you looking at that have maybe done that? Just curious your strategic thoughts around that.
It's super hard. Like back when there was, 3 or 4 of us making decisions and all we did was early stage, like that was a lot easier. Today, the hardest thing for me is getting out of the way of my partners, because like these guys are like racehorses, farm analogy for those of you who are farmers. If you pull on the reins of a horse and they'll sit and flip their head and fight you. If you let the reins loose, they'll calm down and all is well. Yeah. And I have to remind myself, stop pulling on the reins, because there's certain skills that some of my partners have that they're really good at it and I need to let them go. So it's hard. I mean, our firm has grown from 10 people to, over 25 people today. Yeah. And all of that is great and wonderful, but there's a lot of moving parts. Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah. So if you're managing the firm like Blake is, you also have all the internal dynamics of kind of a startup or a company. Obviously, there's a lot of administration as well, et cetera. So we can't pivot from venture without what is going on in Utah, Blake. Give people a flavor. Obviously, I'm biased. I have my own thoughts. I'm trying really hard not to talk too much in this podcast because I've been a part of this and have my own thoughts. But I started Peak Capital Partners, a large real estate investment firm. We almost died. We almost did not make it because we started in 2006, the Great Recession. Our strategy was to invest in distressed real estate, but it was so bad that we almost didn't make it. We did make it, came out pretty strong and on top. And when we finally had a little extra cash 10 years ago or so, my partners and I got together and said, what should we have some extra money. Where should we invest it? And I said, I know exactly where we should. There's an undersupply of good capital in the market. At that time, I felt like in Utah, and an oversupply of good entrepreneurs. So we went in strong to that. Now there is so much more capital than there was even a decade ago. What's going on in Utah? Help people that are in the state and out of the state that are listening understand what's the secret sauce? What do you see going on in Utah that makes it so appealing? Give us your thoughts on the Utah venture and tech scene right now.
Yeah, so 1996, when I first got into this, it was like a barren wasteland.
Crickets.
Yeah, and by the way, I couldn't even buy ski passes and give them to my friends in Silicon Valley to come over and look at deals. They're like, yeah, we'll show up Friday at 3:00. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. So that was super hard, and watching these Were Perfect, Novell, Altiris, Omniture, Landis, like all of that. But when you roll forward to today, first of all, I give tons of credit to not only the guys that we've already mentioned, but you throw Aaron Sconnard and Brad Rencher, Blake Murray and Brandon Rodman, the list goes on of these guys that have built big companies. And, we've looked at this thing, and there's a couple of ingredients. One is, it used to be that people would be happy with selling off their company for $50, $100 million.
Yeah, there's a quick exit mentality kind of in Utah, yeah.
Not anymore. Now you have Adobe and Oracle and Google. All these companies are setting up big presence. Factor in the universities. like when I was going to school, what we were told to do is go get a job at like Ford Motor Company or somebody like that. Today, no, they all want to go be entrepreneurs. It's interesting to go talk to the university recruiting because they're like, we don't even know where the students are going because they're going to go do startups. They all want to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, the risk profile, like people are okay with like taking a chance and failing. One of the interesting things before we make an investment into any companies is I always try to go to dinner with the entrepreneurs and their plus ones, their spouses, because I want to understand if the spouse is ready for this journey.
Yeah. So
when I think about what's going on today, it's like the light switch has flipped, and was it $30 billion in exits last year? I think I just read something. There was $1 billion put into companies here locally.
This year so far?
Yeah, this year. And then, our friends from the Valley, our friends from the coast, they're all over here wanting to figure out how
They don't even need free ski passes now to come.
No,
they're coming.
Yeah.
They're here.
They call and say, can we use a conference room?
Exactly, yeah.
And then, of course, I charge them. No, I'm just kidding. We always welcome
California rates, Silicon Valley rates.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a special ingredient right now. There's just like the right amount of density in Utah, or there has been. The ecosystem in Silicon Valley has been so competitive that you almost had companies constantly poaching from each other, and it was just so competitive. We definitely have some of that in Utah, but it hasn't been so dense that it's been like survival of the fittest. There is definitely more of a team kind of aspect, I feel like, to our ecosystem.
My friends from the Valley that come over here, there's a constant thing is the entrepreneurs help each other here.
Yeah.
They care about each other. They may be competing like intensely, but you know what? They stand at a soccer game with their kids and chat. They're friends. They go to dinner together, and that's unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what has been successful over here is, think about them. These guys hang out. They own houseboats at Lake Powell together. They're friends.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy to think that 7 years ago when we started Peak Ventures, we were the first institutional venture fund in Utah County.
Yeah.
Right. And now there's a plethora of funds. There's a lot of liquidity in markets from exits. We know about some of the big exits, but even other exits that are now what are some of the trends that you see in the future? They're causing a lot of family offices or individuals, I guess, kind of like myself as angels, to invest heavily into deals. What do you see in the future? Give us the outlook for Utah tech and venture for the next decade. I mean, give us your best guesses, or what are some of the most interesting trends and things that are happening?
Well, housing prices are out of control.
Yep.
So there's that. And I don't see it slowing down at all.
Yeah.
And I think one of the interesting trends, if you think about Silicon Valley for just a minute, the amount of angels that we're investing, we've never really had the mass density of angels here.
Yeah.
But, look across the companies that have gone public or exited, the number of multimillionaires. And by the way, these guys are... men and women are hardcore, like they want to invest. I was on the phone with a couple of them last night on my drive home. They want to do some angel investing alongside us. I think that engine is just getting started. When I first got into the business, there was something called Utah Angels.
Yeah.
It consisted of, a couple dozen guys, and that was it.
Yeah.
And
there's a little bit more of a country club feel. I'm not
right.
We know the guys who started, they're great investors, but it just was a little different than now. People are deploying, and they would write much smaller checks. People are deploying much more significant checks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see it continuing to grow. I see the angel network being, first of all, a super valuable thing that this state didn't have.
Yeah.
And I think, I'll speak for Peloton, like we're making a concerted effort to figure out how to partner with the angel network. Have no interest in competing with them because I think it's such an important ecosystem to the overall success of where we go.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other ingredient that hasn't been in Utah. When I started a startup out of BYU 20 years ago. I graduated in 2001. There was one game in town, V Spring Capital, basically, for early stage. And that is a lot different now. There's so much more capital than there has ever been here, which is another critical aspect to, of course, venture, but just tech growth. You burn a lot of money building technology companies and software companies, oftentimes, and you need that capital to have the runway in order to find product market fit or to reach scale or to surround yourself with the team you need to really grow. And so there's just more, that's one of the key ingredients to Utah that hasn't really been here, and it's growing constantly, is the amount of capital that's here and available.
By the way, when you started Peak in Utah County, I was super jealous. As I drove from Utah County to Salt Lake to go to work, I'm like, crap, I should go down there and like bum an office off Jeff.
No, that's right. Yeah, you've always been living down here. Your office has been at the Cottonwood Corporate Center, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, the amount of capital. What's interesting is, like, there's a lot of Silicon Valley firms who have people who live here in Utah. And, they have a connection to Utah. With COVID, they've kind of opened it up. A lot of people have moved here. So these firms have people running around. So I think it's going to only, look, it makes it more competitive for guys like you and I, Jeff, but I think
it's good for the entrepreneurs.
It's so good for the entrepreneurs.
Which that's another key thing about venture that you may not understand. Like, entrepreneurs are the star of the show, right? Like, it's about the entrepreneurs. It's not about the venture capitalists. I mean, we're there with capital, we're there with support, et cetera, but really it's about the CEOs or founders that are laying it on the line every day in their startups, right? I mean, you would 100% echo that.
Yeah,
sure.
No, I mean, if you think about it, you and I are going to build a portfolio of 30 companies.
Yeah.
If a third of them fail, we still have 20 shots on goal. An entrepreneur, it's one.
One and done, yeah.
One and done. And so, like, the amount of pressure, and that's why we look at it and say, you know what? You got to work for those guys. And the men and women that we've had the privilege of interacting with as entrepreneurs, you can see it. So what do you do as an investor to not add to that? And, part of what I've seen in my career is, some venture capitalists that think that, if something goes wrong, they need to run the company. Like, that's failure.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, since 1996, we've had to step in and run one of our companies, and it was a disaster. And that's why my partner had to go be CEO, and we're just like, oh no, we're really in trouble.
Venture capitalists do not want to run your company.
No.
They don't have time to. Again, like Blake said, they have a portfolio of, I've invested in over 100 deals, I think, here in Utah. I can hardly take the calls of my entrepreneurs, let alone like run the company. So it's critical. I've always thought that kind of 1 + 1 = 3. That's what you're looking for in the right investor partner. Yeah. And again, it shouldn't be adversarial, of course. There's a little jockeying, like I said, on the front end. But after an investment is made, you are both shoulder to shoulder, rowing on the same side of the table, trying to make things happen. And Blake, you have an illustrious track record of that, which I admire. I'm going to pivot, true to the entrepreneur forum. I'm going to say pivot. I'm going to bridge us with a little bit more personal question and then 2 more to end it. And this is a thoughtful question. I want you to think about this. So you've seen investors fail, you've seen entrepreneurs fail. You've seen investors succeed. There is more capital than has ever been in the state. I had lunch with Todd Peterson, the founder of Vivint, a week ago. We spoke a little bit about this. Tell me about the effect of money and success in your life, in entrepreneurs that you've seen. We're having more of that, more success, more capital. Give us, what are your thoughts on that? How have you seen that affect people? Do you have any advice? It is something I'm concerned of as someone who's had a little bit of success and have friends that have had a lot of success. It's something that I think is on our minds. It's something that we talk about when we get together. Thoughts on this little more personal question? Yeah,
I call it a touchstone. Find your touchstone. What is that's going to keep you grounded? For me, it was one of the first things my wife wanted to do was give money away. Like, that's where we started. It wasn't buy a new car, buy a new house. It was we wanted to give money away. And when you put that in the forefront, I think it helps bring things into perspective in that, my success at Peloton is driven because I have an unbelievable wife, wonderful children, great partners. When you start believing that it's you, that think about you as founders. It's your co-founders, it's your employees, it's that kind of stuff. And so, I worry sometimes that so much wealth created at a young age for some of these individuals, they got to find their touchstone. And for us, it's we try to be pretty thoughtful in being philanthropic in how we approach. And there are some organizations that are near and dear to our hearts that we actually we give a lot of money to because they are near and dear to our heart.
So charitable giving is one of the Modersitzki's touchstones, right? That brings you back, which I agree. I think that's critical. I do worry about, you see a lot of success and good things with the money. A lot of that money, by the way, is recycled back into the ecosystem. Todd and I and others, we're very committed, Blake as well, of course, putting money back into the system. It's great, but it can be ruinous at times. It can be hurtful at times in personal lives or in families, and it is concerning.
Oh, so concerning.
And it's heartbreaking.
And that's why I think the angel community in a collaborative environment is so important, because, things that I learned from, guys that are the generation in front of me and people who are the generation behind me, that's super helpful. And so, you and Todd and, the list goes on of these angel investors, how important you guys are to the ecosystem and to firms like us. And that's why we're trying to be thoughtful on making sure that you guys see us as a partner, because you're that important, because you're mentoring these guys on a daily basis.
Yeah. And oftentimes angels will go in kind of earlier, right? Really, angels will go be the first round, and then hopefully it grows up and goes to Peloton or any of the great firms here in the state of Utah, right? And you guys fund the seed or the A round or whatever the case may be.
Totally. And and the other firms here locally, they're we have a very conscious approach on we want to be friendly. We know we'll compete at sometimes, but we always see how can we make room for all of us.
Yeah, like I said, it's a team sport in a lot of ways. Venture is. I didn't understand that before I got into the business many years ago. Okay, so you spoke. I want to two more personal questions. We'll wrap this up. You spoke about how rough and tumble it is, how up and down it is. It's a roller coaster. I've experienced that myself. It can be all consuming. Again, first and foremost, you're a husband and a father. How do you not bring that home to Sandy? Give us some tips, because, I've had a couple of young entrepreneurs on the podcast, like Joseph Woodbury of Neighbor, which is another deal we did together, right? Yep. Anyways, let's not start listing them because we'll forget them. But and these are the kind of things that he's asking and thinking about is, how do I run this super high growth, exciting business, but still, again, be a dad and a husband, or some of those more important roles that we have in life, even though these are critical. What advice would you have for that? Where have you failed there? Where have you done well? Give the entrepreneurs and VCs out there some advice.
Yeah. So here's, I fail a lot more than I succeed. My oldest daughter, her name's McCall Weeks. She married a kid here from Provo, Tanner. And when she first graduated from high school, she'd come and temp for us. When our receptionists go on vacation, she'd sit at the front desk. And she was sitting at the front desk for us for a week. And at the end of the week, I went to her and I said, McCall, I'm all excited. I got her in the office, so much fun. I said, McCall, what'd you think? She goes, I hated it. And I went, what? She goes, I hate it, Dad. This is the worst ever. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she goes, Dad, you bring so much stress to the office, and I don't think you even know it. Your demeanor.
Really? She said this?
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
She totally called me out on it.
Wow.
And it was one of those things where, first of all, I had to step back and go, okay, so how am I acting at home?
Yeah.
How do I act to, my partners are my best friends. And if I'm doing that to my daughter, what am I doing to those guys?
Yeah.
And it was this great life lesson. I am failing as a guy running the firm here in so many aspects. And so I've always tried to almost check myself. I check in with my all my daughters to say, how am I doing? And what's great about my daughters is they'll tell me.
Yeah.
So when I think about success, it's like, can you admit your failures? Like seriously, and can you say sorry?
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, why?
Yeah.
And anyway, that was like this big.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
That was like a decade ago when I thought I was on top of the world. And it's like, bam, slammed to the mat.
Nothing like daughters. I had Coach Pope on, who has 4 daughters, and he said that they'll just lay it on him after a loss. And by the way, I'll say I have 1 daughter, 3 sons. My daughters are the hardest on me too. Yeah. She'll hear this and then she'll give me a hard time. But yeah, that's cool. So we go ahead, Blake. Were you gonna say something else?
Oh no, daughters are the best.
They are. It's great. I wish I had a couple more. So to wrap up, we've kind of spanned the gamut here. We've talked a lot about finance and venture capital and successes and failures. But what other I often like to wrap up with this or ask my guests. So we've talked about venture and finance, but again, we're all fellow travelers. We all have great things about us. We all have bad things. We all have strengths and weaknesses. We're all fellow travelers. We need compassion. What are any life lessons? Like, how would you sum it up so far, Blake, for yourself? Or what other life lessons that maybe don't surround venture and business are critical to you, important to you? Give us a parting shot with some life lessons from Blake Modersitzki.
Yeah, interesting question. I mentioned in the onset this book, The Go-Givers, and Did
you read this recently? By the way, I haven't heard of this.
No, I was given to me from a friend maybe 12, 15 years ago.
It's called Go-Givers.
Go-Givers,
okay.
And it's like 100 pages long. And I threw it in my bag, and I was like, I don't do this stuff. Well, Sandy and I were celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary, and we'd gone on vacation, and I'd read everything I brought, like done all my crossword puzzles, like I didn't have anything else to do. And I'm like, all right. So I pull this book out, and Sandy sees me, and I start to read it. And I'm like 2 pages into it, and I shut it, and she goes, that bad? And I actually walked into the gift shop, and I bought a highlight marker. And I started to read it because I was going through this really difficult situation with a couple of the people on my team, and what I realized is I was the problem. Like I needed to show more kindness, more patience. And in this book, there's this guy who is this hardcore sales guy, driver, like looking for success. And the harder he drove, the less success he had. And he met this guy who was, he was the giver. He was the go-giver. And he just spent, time and time and time giving. I needed to realize that I needed to find somebody to coach me. And that was hard for me because I was just like, I don't know. But that reiteration and constant reminder of kindness. I've given you a couple of examples. You guys are all going to think that I'm a horrible individual and not very kind because
Blake, I've already said that your reputation is one of kindness, but keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like,
we all fall short.
Are you being kind in general? Like I joke with my wife sometimes, like I'm going to go get a tattoo that says kindness on it. And she just kind of looks at me like I've really lost my mind. But that helps keep me grounded on multiple fronts. And it's been these little life lessons throughout my life where it's been this constant reminder that you can never give too much kindness. And it, I had a conversation yesterday where I had somebody remind me of that wonderful principle again. And so I try to think about that. So when I think about life lessons, ask yourself, when I die, what are people going to say about me?
Yeah.
And that's really take that inventory. And if you'll do that, trust me, you'll find your touchstone.
Yeah. I love that. We are often the problem.
Yeah.
Real quick, when did you read? So I'm trying to how old were you roughly, just when you read that book and you were having these thoughts?
Yeah, I was in my early 40s.
Okay, so early 40s.
Yeah. I mean, I thought I was on.
Have you gone back and read that, or you just think about it all the time?
I've read it multiple times. I've given the book away to a bunch of people. Once again, it's like 100 pages, and for me, it was really impactful. But it wasn't so much the it's a fun story, but it was this principle around kindness and giving without expectation of return.